Hello, everybody, and welcome to this eMarketer Academy webinar. Thank you so much for joining me this morning, and I hope that you've got your creativity and imagination on and curiosity when it comes to how sales and marketing teams can work better together, how they can align their efforts in closing more deals, winning more business, keeping customers around for longer. And I'm going to bring you some scenarios where these things can take place. I'm going to give you a lot of examples and exercises today that are practical tips that you can use in your meetings with your sales and marketing colleagues. Now, if someone from my team could please let me know if my sound is coming through okay and that you're seeing the image here, that'll be fine. Sound looks good. Slides should be showing, and we are ready to rock and roll. All right, so without further ado, let us dive into why you need to care about sales and marketing alignment, what it is, how it's changing our roles, whether we're in the sales teams or in the marketing teams. If you are a marketeer and you are joining this webinar on your own, you still have 30 seconds or so to grab a sales colleague and bring them into the webinar as well, because this is really interesting if we are both represented here. And likewise, if you're from sales and you've got your marketing teammate there on Microsoft Teams or Slack, or maybe even in the office, bring them along with a cup of coffee, because this really works better if we're both here. All right. My name is Klaus, and I work with marketing at eMarketer. I've been here for more than 10 years, working with marketing, with sales, with partners, and the overall message of how marketing and sales is being impacted by the changes we face, be it from a technology standpoint, from a buyer journey standpoint, or be it from the last couple of years here where our whole world has been turned upside down, working from home, working much more digitally than we have been before, and how these things are impacting us. That's what I spend my days with here. Now, I obviously represent eMarketer. We're a software company, and we've built a marketing automation platform. Now, I'm not a developer. I'm not a coder. I am, like you, I would imagine, somebody who's working with sales and marketing day in, day out, and trying to figure out how we can best approach prospects, turn them into interested leads for our sales teams, and how sales teams can best close these leads into happy customers that stay around. That's my everyday. Hope that makes sense. All right, so we're going to be here for about an hour or so, depending on how many questions you guys have. Now, as you know, if you've been on one of these webinars before, I really encourage you to let me know what you're thinking during the webinar. Ask me questions, submit your comments, bring your thoughts to the table here. Now, all of the other people in the webinar can't see what you're writing, right? They can't see what you're asking. So don't be shy. It's just much more interesting to get your inputs and feedback during the webinar, and I will bring that into play here. And we can already get started. So if you can get your thinking caps on and think about what your best tip is, and I don't care whether you're from marketing or the sales side, what is your best tip for bringing sales and marketing closer together? Now, it doesn't have to be a long list. You don't have to write a novel. Just in a few words, what is your best tip to bringing sales and marketing together? And shoot them in the questions box, and maybe I will bring some of them in during the webinar as we go. As mentioned, I'm from eMarketer. We have a marketing automation platform that enables you to do a lot of your marketing tasks in one platform. We're a Swedish company based just outside Stockholm. That is basically everything that I will spend time on with regards to our company, because that's really not the topic of the webinar today. So the objectives are to understand why we need to care about sales and marketing alignment, and how we can go about getting more aligned in these two teams. Because research shows that organizations where sales and marketing are working in close unison, in close alignment, close more deals, keep customers around for longer, and generate more value. And I would venture to say, have a more interesting workplace as well, when we ditch the silos and work more collaboratively on our efforts. The role of selling and buying has also changed dramatically. You've heard me talk about this numerous times if you've been on some of these webinars before, but I will dive into how that's even further how that change is driven even further after the last couple of years here. And then lastly, we will get some hands-on tips on how to get this teamwork going between sales and marketing, right? So I will give you concrete tips, I will give you questions to ask, and I will give you some exercises that you can basically copy this presentation and bring some of those questions into your next sales and marketing meeting that you're having, and see how that works for you. So obviously I will give you all of the slides and the recording after the webinar, so you don't need to screen grab too much or note too much down. What you do need to write is in the questions box. Let me know what your best tip is for aligning your sales and marketing team. Okay, so let's dive into the subject matter here. What is it really that have happened that have changed these roles so dramatically? And if you've been on some of these lead management, lead nurturing webinars, sales enablement webinars, either from me or others, surely you've seen the depiction of the customer journey, something like this. Yesteryear, it used to be the marketing team that created awareness, and then the sales team that stewarded the whole customer journey, that were in dialogue with prospects and suspects and brought them into the fold as customers. And then you've heard us talk about content marketing, lead nurturing, the role of internet, social media, blogs, networks, how that customer journey is being so much driven by content and by marketing now, and that we've been leaving sales a little bit in the dark there. Now, this change goes even further now, because as we're talking about alignment of these teams, we're talking about bringing them together to really work on the entire customer journey, not have this separation there where we kind of hand off leads to sales, but rather look at it as a collaborative effort, where sales is included in the entire customer journey, not only when the lead is handed over to sales, but certainly in the creation of content, in the ideas behind which people do we need to talk to, what are the challenges and the objectives of our buyers, what kind of content resonates well with the CFOs, what content resonates well with the procurement managers, and so on. So looking at the customer journey much more as a collaborative effort, where we as marketeers really need the input from sales and from account managers on what is important for their buyers, and they need input from us on where people are active, where people are tricking, what kind of content is working in the customer journey, and so on. So a very collaborative efforts, moving away from now the marketing job is done, now sales take over, to a more unified collaborative view on this whole customer journey. There was this quote in a Gartner study called Future of Sales 2025 that I really liked, and it had to do with the ability to meet the customer's new buying preferences and succeed at virtual selling. Sales leaders, commercial leaders, and marketeers really need to adopt a digital mindset. And they go on to say that by just a couple of years, 80% of the business-to-business sales interactions will be purely digital. Now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't include salespeople or account managers or reps or experts. It just means that the buyers have an enormous preference for engaging digitally, have an enormous preference for consuming content that is always on. So white papers, videos, webinars, just like this, on-demand content, and so much more, where they can educate themselves on the products and offerings that the different suppliers have out there. So if we thought that the role of sales had diminished, well, you can say that the sales time where you traditionally do sell is probably less now than it has been before, but the role of sale is turning not from sitting there at the end of the funnel, but really being represented across the entire buyer journey, across this digital axis of the buying. So we used to say that sales was not included in 70% of the buying journey or the sales cycle, but let's change that to saying 80% of the sales cycle is digital. Now that, again, that doesn't mean that sales is not included. It means that sales is spread out across the buyer journey, fueling the marketing team with ideas for content, with ideas for personas, with ideas of how to best approach the market. And again, consuming feedback from marketing on where leads are, which leads are most interesting right now, and how to pursue these leads with more traditional sales approaches. And the problems get even worse, if you will. The challenge is even more dire, because when you look at a survey also done by Gartner, where they researched close to 800 B2B companies and their sales processes, they asked them, how much time do you spend with the potential supplier of what you are setting out to buy? And the response across the board there was that around 70% of the overall buying process time was spent with potential suppliers, right? So that's less than 20%. And keep in mind, unless you're the only potential supplier of what they're out to buy, you will have to split that 70% with other suppliers. So let's say that the buyer has a short list of 3, maybe 4 different vendors. You have to split that 70% of their time with these other vendors. So you're looking at maybe 5% of the overall buying time that is spent with you. So 95% of the time that the buyer spends on making a decision doesn't include normal sales meetings with potential suppliers. So researching online, researching offline, meeting with the stakeholders in the company, what is called the buying group, is taking up so much time. So how do we make sure that when we're only left with, at best, 17%, and probably more likely something like 5% or less, how do we make sure that we can influence these other areas of activity that the buyer is doing? By supplying content, by being always on, by having messages for them throughout their journey as they do their research. So we've always said that we need to help salespeople be armed with information about the leads and be armed with the content that we have available. But this, and giving the tools there, this has been called sales enablement. But now there's another term coming on now that is buyer enablement. And that is phrased in this quote that I like. As hard as it has become to sell in today's world, it has become that much more difficult to buy. The single biggest challenge of selling today is not selling, it is actually our customers struggle to buy. Now, what does that mean? So if we as suppliers think it's been more complex, there are more tools that we can navigate to reach our customers, there are more ways that we can try to influence them. Just think about the buyer. They are looking at a plethora of different options. They are looking at tons of different content they can consume, and it's become even more complex to make these decisions. So just from our neck of the woods in our industry, marketing software, sales enablement software, and so on, this is our landscape now. There are more than 8,000 vendors in our space. All of this mud here on the screen, these are all logos. These are all platforms that either do marketing technology, marketing enablement, or sales enablement. So when I joined this company 10 plus years ago, there were 150 suppliers in this space. Now there are more than 8,000. Yeah, so it's definitely a more competitive market space, and it's becoming harder to sell. But just imagine, as a buyer making a decision in this landscape, which tool should we go for? Which technology is right for you? What is the best organizational fit? What is the best for our industry, and so on? It is becoming increasingly complex to be a business-to-business buyer in many, many, many scenarios. So I think, and that also shows in one of the stats here from Gartner, that almost 8 out of 10 B2B buyers said that their latest solution purchase was either very complex or difficult. So that goes to say that the buyer situation here is also increasingly becoming more and more difficult. And those that succeed are the ones that are not selling, but that are helping companies buy. Now, I know this sounds like a cliche, but if you really start to think about it and think about how you approach customers, how you do your pitches, how you do your content, this will really have an impact if you switch your mindset from trying to sell to help someone buy, help someone make a decision. The Gartner study also showed that companies that are able to inform and help and steward prospects through their buying journey have a 3 times more likelihood of actually closing the deal. They get closer to the prospects, they have more time in the buying journey than their competitors, and they have a better chance of closing the deal if they are on the informative, on the helping side of things, understanding their situation and delivering answers to their questions rather than trying to sell. Sounds obvious, but it's really difficult to make that mind shift actually. So if we look at the process that these prospects are going through, what does a buying process look like, and which stages do we need to cater to as salespeople and as marketers, and how can we help each other do that? One way of looking at the purchase decision or the buying decision is through the business-to-business buying jobs proposed by Gartner. So the first top one here is we identify a problem. We need to do something. We need to get a new CRM, or we need to source products from somewhere else. So we need a new whatever it is that it is that you're after. You identify a problem. You need something. You need a solution. And then you go exploring, right? That's when you do your research, you ask your peers, you look at social media, you download white papers and so on. This whole identification phase of what solutions are out there to solve the problem that we think we have. Then you start building requirements. What do we need the solution to do based on what we know from our own organization and what we're learning from sellers of potential suppliers of potential solutions. And then you start looking at different suppliers that can provide your needs to your needs. And when you do that, you typically go back to the solution exploration and the requirements building, because you get smarter about what your problem actually is. If there are good suppliers out there that help you get educated on your problem and the potential solutions, there's a big chance that your requirements will change through the process here. And then lastly, we go validation. Okay, we think this is the right product for us, and then you need to create consensus in the organization. Maybe you need to get management on board, budget approvals, users, whatever it is that helps this fit into your organization. And now, yeah, 6 steps, but they look nicely organized here. But the reality is, of course, that this is a very muddy journey with lots of different backs and forths and loops. And this is just a depiction from that piece of research there, where you have the process of starting, identifying, going through the exploration and decision-making process. But along the way, there are a lot of loops. You do research online, you participate in a webinar, you download a white paper, you read trends report, you go to suppliers' websites, and so on. So there is a lot of back and forth in here. And this is where the buyers are spending a lot of their time, right? So at somewhere down here, maybe you have some meetings with sales rep. Maybe at the beginning here, you send some RFPs. But in between, you get a lot of information. And we as marketers and as sales teams, we need to make sure that we have content that caters to these different scenarios, that caters to these different steps in the buying process, and that we understand what content and what format helps people buy instead of trying to sell to them. So in a nutshell, customers and buyers of today need content to make a well-informed decision, which is why sales and marketing teams need to align, need to understand one another in order to succeed, because sales is part of the process that helps buyers identify problems and solutions and figure out whether their solution is a good fit. And marketing are the ones that are creating the content and drafting the messages and writing to the different target groups. And that cannot be done in silos. That needs to be done together. And if we're successfully able to do so, get rid of our prejudices, get rid of what we think sales needs to do and what we think marketing needs to do, and look at it in a more unified way, we have a better shot at succeeding at this. All right. I'm seeing some ideas and tips coming in on how to, on your best tips on aligning here. I would love to see some more. So you've got your thinking caps on now and your ideas are starting to flow. Let me know in the questions box. Again, other participants can see your inputs. It's just for me and for sharing with the group here. What are your best tips to getting a sales team and a marketing team aligned? Get them together on the same page and work towards the same goal. If you have any tips for me that I could share with the group, let me know. Okay, so now we're down to brass tacks here and going to look at concrete ways where sales and marketing teams can get aligned. You will also find articles and research now saying that we're past the sales and marketing alignment. We're past the point where we need to discuss whether we have a sales team or a marketing team. Ditch all of that. We have a commercial unit focused around the buyer journey. We don't talk about sales and marketing anymore. We're talking about commercial units that work completely harmonious. That may be the case, but I'm still kind of referring to the teams of sales and marketing, also the competencies that are in the sales and marketing teams, just to make this a bit easier to grasp. So now we're going to go through these 4 key areas and discuss how sales and marketing meetings could pan out when we focus on these 4 different areas. So think here that we are doing meetings where sales and marketing, the commercial unit, is together, and that these talking points, these questions are raised not in the silos, not with your peers in marketing or your peers in sales, but together. And these discussions are taking place in those commercial teams there. The first step is obviously know your buyer. We can't have any discussion about messaging, about content, about meeting the needs of our buyers if we don't know who they are. So in your meetings here with sales and marketing, define your buyer personas. And here are some questions you can ask the sales team and or in that joint meeting there. Something about basic demographics. Where do they live? What age are they? What education do they have? What type of organizations are they working at? What is their role? What is their challenge? What are their aspirations? What is their power position in the organization they work on, and so on. So the more specific you can be on who your buyers are, and it's not one person, you probably have more personas out there. You have somebody that focuses on economy. Maybe it's the CFO you need to convince at the buyer organization. Maybe you have engineers. Maybe you are catering to human resource departments. Whatever it is, you build personas that are typical to those target groups that you need to convince to make a purchase. And here the collaboration between sales and marketing is really, really needed, because sales and account managers, they are in face-to-face contact with customers. They are frontlining. They're seeing which types of persons they're meeting out there and how their challenges are, how they succeed in organization, and how they make decisions. So together in these sales and marketing teams, go through the exercise, for instance, of a day in the life of one of our buyers. If you are selling solutions to human resource department, you could go through a day in the life of a human resource manager. What is her role? What are her challenges? How many persons are in her team? What kind of education does she have? How does her boss measure her success, and so on? And the more specific you can be on this in the sales and marketing teams together, the more specific you can be on building your personas. Maybe you need 1, 2, maybe you need more. Start small and then build from there. And be specific. Give them a name and write down these different traits that are important. Because the more specific you get, you can start building content. You can start building message that will focus on these personas and that will help you solve their problems and show them that you understand what situation they're in. So this is crucial. And some of the questions you could ask when you define your personas in the sales and marketing teams there are, do we cover all of our personas? In the marketing team, maybe we're just focusing on the target end user of our product, but in the decision-making process, there may be many other personas that we haven't thought about. What does sales say about that? Do we agree across the teams on the profiles that are most important? Are we comfortable talking to them? Meaning that in our case, for instance, we supply marketing software, so we're quite comfortable talking to marketeers because, you know, we're peers. We understand all the different 3-letter abbreviations and what's going on in the industry and so on. But what if a sales director enters the room or the CEO enters the room? Are we comfortable talking to them about our product? Do we understand the persona there? And lastly, do we have the right messages and promises to them? So taking these questions in your team meetings there and asking them openly, so you can start drafting your personas based on inputs from the people who work with the customers and the people who work with building the material and the content there, is really, really fruitful. Here's an example from our neck of the woods that could be a persona. we'll look at the bio of a person. We give her a name. We come up with an image. This could be a target person, a persona for us. Her education, her company size, her goals, her challenges, how we would pitch to her, why our solution is a good fit for her, and so on. So you can imagine building 4 or 5 of these personas and sticking them to the walls of the sales and marketing office, and really discuss when you're creating content, who are we talking to? Is this the marketing Marie, or is this the finance Fiona, or who are we talking to here? And are we sure that we are not kind of making the message a bit blurry by trying to speak to everybody at the same time, right? So that's a good exercise to do in your team. Ask these questions about what our personas are, what their challenges are, and are we comfortable talking to all of them. And I've mentioned an exercise here called role play. So now when you're down to having a couple of personas, try to step into the shoes of those personas and then pitch to that persona with your team. How would you respond? Are you really in the mindset of that persona? And are you able to formulate the answers and the solutions to the challenges that your fictive persona there is having? All right, so now that we know who we are talking to and whom we need to convince, let's look at the buying processes that they're doing. So what are the objectives of the buyer? How do they engage in the buying process? How do they gather information? How long time does a buying process take? What are the challenges and complexities of the buying process? How much organizational login and buy-in do the buyer need to achieve the end goal of buying a solution, and so on. Ask these questions in the team and then physically map it out. I'm talking about a massive whiteboard or tons of Post-its. You will stick them on the wall and you will start mapping out something like this. Doesn't have to be along the Gartner model at all, whatever matches your fancy and your industry. But the idea here is, and the important thing is, that you do this as a team. You discuss the buyer journey and the decision-making process and where and how it maps out. And when you have that together with your personas, you can start aligning these things and figure out, do we know what to say to persona A when he or she is in the problem identification phase? Or how will we convince persona B when her requirements building suddenly starts to feature creep, scope creep, and help her stay online and stay within the parameter of what she set out to do, and so on. And by doing that, having your personas and the journey that they're on mapped out across sales and marketing teams is really, really helpful in helping you understand what content to deliver. So now that we've gone through the process of knowing who we're talking to and which process they're going through, well, it's nice that we can go into knowing what to say to them. And again, reminder, this is not a marketing exercise. The content ideation, the content creation is not only the marketing folks. We need to ditch that and look at the entire team here who can benefit from learning from one another. So when we're looking at what to say, some of the questions to ask across the team is, do we really have content for all of our personas, right? We draft this beautiful white paper on what is important in our industry, and we send that out to prospective buyers, and we put it onto the website. But maybe that white paper is trying to speak to everybody at the same time, right? So are you sure that that white paper will convince somebody who's really interested in the finance side of things, or in the solution, or in engineering, or the sustainability impacts of what you're offering? Probably not. So maybe you can take that beautiful white paper and kind of change the tone or the intro or the imagery so you can version it into different scenarios. So you have the same topic, more or less, maybe 80 or 70% of the content is the same, but it still deals with what you're offering. But the framing, the context of what you're trying to say caters to different personas so that you can convince different people instead of thinking about a generic message for all. Again, aligning it with the journey. Do we have content for the different steps in the journey? How is our content used? Are we only producing text, or are we also doing video and images and infographics, short text bits for social media, email copy for sales and follow-up and lead nurturing and so on? How do we use our content? And are we making sure that when we spend a lot of time creating beautiful content, that we really repurpose it as much as we can across our different channels? And And also questions like, how can sales be a channel? Like, it's not only marketing that are communicating. Sales are a channel, just like email and social media and so on. Sales is also a communications channel. They have email dialogues, they have phone calls, they have social media, they do social selling. How can we use our content in the sales channel, and what do salespeople think about that? Do they have the competencies? Are they comfortable using their social media profiles to share stuff like this and go into dialogues with prospects there? All things that are great to discuss in these meetings. Then as exercises, I've mentioned content ideation, not creation. Now, what's the difference? Clearly, copywriting, infographic designing, video production, these things require specific competencies, and they typically reside in the marketing team. But the ideation, that is the idea generation, the brainstorming meetings around what kind of content could be useful, that should not only reside in the marketing team at all. So the ideation is a great teamwork exercise to try to come up with ideas of either repurposing existing content or coming up with ideas for new content that would cater to our personas and that would cater to their buying process. Think about content repurposing. How could the content we have be used in different ways, in different formats, in different channels to reach more buyers and reach them in more stages of the buying journey? So these are some of the exercise ideas that I would propose. And then obviously the goal is to have content, different types, different content formats for the different steps in the customer journey, in the buying process there. I know that the idea of a funnel, and I've shown that with the Gartner process there, is the funnel is a little bit naive in its depiction of a nicely, first they are interested in this kind of material and then they're interested in that kind of material. But just as a depiction here, that we make sure that we have content that caters to the different stages there, top, middle, and bottom of funnel. And then looking at aligning the content with our sales message, because one thing is what we have on our brochures, what we have on our website, what we're posting out there, but the sales message in our presentations, in our email copy, and in our dialogues, is it really aligned? Are we sure that we're saying the same thing? Do marketeers participate in sales meetings, in sales pitches? Do they actively discuss the presentation material? Are they listening in on Canvas calls? The more marketing can eavesdrop in the sales process and understand what's being said and how it's being said, the better they can adapt and change and do their content for that sales message to make sure that they're on par. There's nothing more jolting for a buyer than to be part of a lead nurturing process where you're catering to their persona, you're showing that you're understanding their situation, and all of a sudden when they talk to a sales rep, they have another vocabulary, they have another view on the solution and so on. That's really not a good experience there. So make sure that you truly understand that process and that you're listening to the sales message. How do we sell today? How do we want to sell tomorrow? Are we in line here? Do we have the material we need? And does marketing have the knowledge from the sales meetings, from the sales pitches that they need? So as exercises, participate in sales pitches, do sales pitches internally. Why not hand over the sales presentation to the marketing team and hear how they would present it, and vice versa? So present to one another and be open about how you're seeing things from these different perspectives. Again, channel ideation. So getting ideas about how you can get your message out in other channels than the traditional ones that you're using today. Maybe social media, maybe chatbots, maybe automated calls, maybe lead nurturing, maybe other things where you can repurpose your content and where you can be kind of always on. Again, back to that, the 80% of the sales cycle or the buying journey there is expected to be digital. So we need to have things that are working even in the evenings when sales teams are not picking up the phone or making calls. We need to have content and channels that are always on there. All right, so some of the reason why the content fails that we are doing in marketing when we're doing it in isolation, and we think we have a good idea of what to say and how to present it, I would venture to say that the top reasons why they fail is you don't differentiate. We talked about personas. You can't have a generic message for all. You need to think about what parts of your product and what parts of your solution is important to the CFO, to the engineer, to the human resource team, if they are important stakeholders in the decision-making process. You don't understand how they buy, what process they're going through, what information is important. So instead, you just show them everything at the get-go instead of figuring out what's important in the different steps there. And lastly, there, you haven't involved sales, or you haven't been involved in a sale. So it goes both ways, right? There's nothing more demotivating for a sales team, or for somebody who's expected to take ownership of lead follow-up or of a campaign activity, if they haven't been part of the creation or the ideation of that message, of that campaign. It's just something that's handed over to them and say, here's the result, good luck with the new brochure, or good luck with our new social media campaign. If they don't have ownership, if they haven't been part of the ideation process there's not a good chance that they'll appreciate taking part of the follow-up afterwards. All right, so let's move on from, now that we know who we're talking to, we know what to say. Now let's look at what to measure, how to figure out what success look like. And this is really about aligning the stuff that matters to the different teams, right? Goals, KPIs, key performance indicators, they're different in different teams, right? Marketing measures something and sales measures other things. That's probably okay. But we need to align on shared goals as well, shared things that we're looking on and keeping everybody accountable for in order to go in the same direction. We also need to agree on definitions. What is a lead? It may be quite different from a salesperson to a marketing person, what they think a good lead is. What is a good customer? Make sure that we have the same definitions and we understand that a quality lead, a marketing qualified lead that should turn into a sales qualified lead, let's make sure that we agreed on the traits of these persons and where they are in the buying cycle, what size of company they are, what type of industry they're in, and so on. I would also say that looking at lead scoring and agreeing on lead scoring is a super exercise, and I've included that on the next couple of slides here, because it helps us talk about a lot of these things that we've been going through. So even though that you're not going to do automated lead scoring in your marketing solution or bringing the lead scoring into a CRM system, just the exercise of going through how you would define your lead scoring model is a great teamwork exercise for sales and marketing to go through, because it shows where you agree on things that are important and where you disagree on which things are important, which is the whole idea of aligning the sales and marketing team. Okay, and then obviously agree on what progress looks like. When are we moving forward? When are we getting better? Is it just the number of leads that are popping up in some Excel file or being exported into the CRM or showing on a report? Or is it actually the outcome, the closed sales or the booked meetings? What does progress look like? Make sure that you agree what progress and success looks like, because otherwise you won't be able to celebrate when you're moving in the right direction together. So some of the questions to ask in your meeting: what are we measuring on and why? Which goals can we share and which are specific? Because again, yes, website visits and conversion rates and optimization metrics and so on, they're important to the marketing team during the marketing tactics. So it's fine that not all goals and all metrics are shared, but we need to figure out which one are shared. The number of marketing qualified leads, if we agree on what a qualified lead is, yeah, that's a good way to start. Number of booked meetings, revenue generated, whatever it is that you can align on and have as shared goals should be specified. Discussing what helps you reach those goals. So now that you know what your shared goals are, what helps you drive you closer to those goals? Again, how do we see progress? What is a lead and what lead behavior is most important? So what does a lead look like? Again, the persona and the industry and so on. And what actions does a lead do that are more important than other actions? And luckily, the exercise proposed for this around lead scoring deals with all of these things. So again, I want to stress, I'm not forcing everybody into doing lead scoring tomorrow in their marketing platforms or in their CRMs or whatnot, But the exercise of going through building a lead scoring paradigm or a lead scoring way of thinking will help you identify a lot of the things across the sales and marketing team that are useful. So why not give it a go at your next joint meeting there? So for instance, build leads, and just a lead score is basically assigning a number to different profile traits and behavioral traits of the persons that you're trying to influence. So you can look at explicit scoring, for instance, who are they, where do they work, what is their role, what is the company size, what's the geography, and so on. So those are things that you kind of would be able to look up on LinkedIn or get from your data enrichment solution and look at the profiles of these persons that you're looking at on. And then there's implicit scoring. That's what they do. Okay, so now we know who they are. We would like to attract people from the Netherlands in this industry that have these job roles, and if they match, we can assign scores to those characteristics. And then we're looking at what are they doing? Are they visiting our website? Are they participating in webinars, downloading brochures, opening white papers, and so on? And figuring out what kind of behavior is more important to you than others, right? All clicks aren't equal. If people visit your website and go to the jobs and careers section, that may be important for the human resource department. But if they go to the case studies and to the pricing page, that's important information for sales. So visits, clicks, opens, interactions with your material across the buying journey, they're not all alike, and you shouldn't treat them like that either. So figure out which actions are most important and score them accordingly. So what should you score on? Here is really where the discussion is great between sales, account management, and marketing, and figuring out what is a good customer, what is a short sales cycle, and how did we manage to shorten that sales cycle for that specific type of customer. And looking at your existing customers, understanding what their profiles are will help you identify what to score on. So looking at which companies you're succeeding with, where they're based, what type of industries they're in, how you've approached them, your existing customer base, and your last, say, 20 or 50 sales will help you identify which traits and which actions are important to score on. Looking at your marketing engagement, their marketing engagement, what kind of material did they participate in, what kind of webinars or events or meetings did they participate in that help them convert. Those are good things to look at. And then lastly, what actions and profiles help them convert into a sale? Are there things that are closer to a sale than others? It could be like a product demo or product trial is probably closer to a sale than some generic content on your website. So analyzing your existing customers and your last sales together with the sales team will help you identify what is important and what you should score on. So as you venture from your persona profiles, where you've mapped out traits that are important, titles that are important, company sizes that are important, and you've looked at content engagement that you want to score on, you can start actually assigning points to these different things. So for instance, if our target group is marketing managers, we will assign some points to that. If we have specific industries that we're successful in, we can assign points to that, company sizes, and so on. And then you've got the implicit scores where they are engaging with your content and doing their work in the buyer's journey there, and you can assign points to them. Now, again, when you go through this and agree with your colleagues in sales and in the sales team and the marketing, which things are important, you will also highlight the differences. Maybe the marketing team thinks that their new website has got to be the most important thing. So when people look at that, you want to score that. You know, maybe that's just out of vanity that the marketing team really wants to benefit from the work they've put into doing a new website. But actually, sales team said, well, yeah, the website is just the starting point, but it's really when we've engaged in an event or they've participated or they've watched this specific video, that's when the website visit is more important. Then we can get to know one another and understand what we think is important here. And then as we assign scores to actions and profiles, we can agree on what a qualified lead is. Then we say, okay, maybe from 0 to 5 points or 0 to 50, depending on how granular you've made your scoring model. This is a cold lead, this is a warm lead, and this is a hot lead. Now, again, if you're not going to do this full scale and going into your marketing automation platform or your CRM and doing these things, the exercise is still worthwhile because you're going through a lot of the things that will map out personas, buying journeys, content that is working for you, customers that you're successful with, and making sure that your teams understand and agree on what is important here. Okay, zooming out and looking at the last area here is knowing how to collaborate. Now, this is more tricky because this has a lot to do with organizational culture, with national culture, with team dynamics, and so on. So I'm going to be a little bit more fluffy here than on the others, but this is just so super important. We need to align competencies and tools, of course, because saying that marketing and sales teams no longer exist, we're just now in one big happy family as a commercial unit, that doesn't really fly. Again, we still have clearly defined roles and responsibilities and competencies, and we need those, and we need them to be clearly defined so that salespeople are not fearing all of a sudden that they need to sit and write a lot of big content pieces for the blog. That's not the idea. They are part of the ideation process. So maybe they participate in the creation of ideas of what should be on the blog, ideas of which new slides we need, and then the graphic designers, the copywriters, the whatnot get to work on actually doing the stuff. So making sure that everybody is at the same page when you create ideas, that is how you assign ownership and assign a willingness to be motivated for this when things start to be produced and go into air. So collaboration on content, pitches, sales copies, phone call scripts, all of the material that we have across the buyer journey, collaborate on the ideas and the feedback and the improvement of these things. Then obviously marketing and sales tools need to play together. Now, this isn't a platform or a software presentation or webinar at all, but we cannot neglect the fact that as we expect teams to work together, we also need our tools to work together. So marketers, they use specific tools for marketing. Salespeople, they use specific tools for the sales process. These two tools, or this stack of tools, need to integrate. They need to talk to one another. Otherwise, we can't expect our people to do so as well. So we need technology as well. We need platforms that play nice with each other. And then we need to be present. This is not a project. This is a process. This is not something that finishes, right? So the sales and marketing alignment, it's not a meeting that takes place and then you're all done. This is an ongoing effort where you cross-fertilize across your teams, where you are present in sales pitches, in sales meetings, in marketing meetings, and you jointly work in these teams, in these meetings to come up with ideas and make sure that you understand solutions and problems of the buyer personas there. So questions to ask when looking at how to collaborate is really being very open, very honest, and dropping and bringing out also the prejudices that are there. So being open about which ideas are worth it. Get buy-in for your projects early on, your content projects early on. Where do we share content and feedback? Do we have the right tools to hand over leads, to hand over information? Do people know where to find new content? These are practical things that needs to be in place, because just dropping that new slide deck on the SharePoint drive or putting that new blog post out there does not help you succeed in this. You really need to have a unified view on how these things get distributed and how they're handed over to one another. And then this point here is, when do we meet? The clue is regularly and often, and make sure that this is an ongoing process where you refine what you've been working on together. So exercises here could be talk through sessions. So when you have ideas, advocate for your idea, explain what you mean, and get feedback on the ideas before you start working on any type of content or project there, and bounce them not only against your colleagues in the different departments, but also against your different personas that you have now developed. What would marketing Marie say? What would finance Fiona say? And as everybody gets acquainted with these different personas, they will be able to advocate their standpoint as well. And this thing with prejudice is really important to get on the table, I think. And this is where maybe where culture also shifts in. You know, things like sales are just lazy. They just want to have the leads on a silver platter, and marketing only care about the colors and so on. Get these prejudices out there and discuss them. Is it really true? What can we do? What motivates you? Is it just budget? Is it acknowledgement? Is it being part of the process? And so on. So really be open and frank, and be able to both take criticism and give constructive criticism or constructive feedback in these meetings to get those prejudices out there. All right, so those were 4 areas that are key to doing marketing, to doing sales, and that are great in facilitating sales and marketing alignment. Some of these questions you can bring into your joint meetings. Some of these exercises you can bring into your joint meetings, and start working on making sure that you understand your buyer and the process they're going through, knowing what to say to them, and that you have content for the entire journey, that you understand what to measure, and that you agree on how progress looks, and that you're measuring on the same things, and then really diving into how best to collaborate on the ideation, on the creation of ideas, of creation of feedback, and on getting knowledge from all aspects of the buyer journey and of the different personas that you have developed together. So those are the 4 items there that I would have you work on based on the exercises, based on the questions to ask there, and doing that more often than not, doing that regularly. It'll be easier as you go along, as you get used to the roles of being. You can also use the prejudices, use the archetypes. Yeah, I know I'm a lazy sales guy, but you know, acknowledging that that's the case, or as a marketer, yeah, I know I only care about the colors, but what if? So kind of play around with humor on those prejudices there that you may have or that you've discussed, and then they become not so dangerous to discuss anymore. All right, so we are closing in on the hour, and I want to make sure that I open up for Q&As. If you have any feedback for me, now's the time to shoot them in the questions box there. I hope this was useful for you and inspirational. Not a typical e-marketer webinar in the sense that we're not looking at tools, we're not looking at software. This is more mind and brain work on how the heck do we get teams to collaborate more, and why is it so important understanding buyers and understanding personas there. Apart from the live webinar, we also have tons of on-demand webinars on our website, emarketeers.com/webinars. Broad top of the funnel, if you will, webinars like this on strategy, but also hands-on webinars on building emails, building campaigns, setting up landing pages, doing lead management, doing marketing automation, and so much more. So dive into to that section if you want to. All right, we're closing in. Getting some positive vibes back on the chat. Thanks for that. In the questions box there, sounds like there was some inspiration to be had there, and maybe you can use my slides as a starting point, at least, for discussion between your sales and marketing colleagues there. Don't expect it to be easy right from the get-go, but I promise you that starting to be open about these things, starting to jointly work on understanding who we are, getting personas up there on the wall will definitely benefit your teamwork and your alignment in your organizations. Feel free to reach out. Let me know what you think. With that said, I want to thank you for your time today, and hope to see you on an upcoming eMarketer webinar in the near future. It's been a delight to present to you today, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Have a great day. Bye-bye, guys.